yeah, we are going to talk now for the next 40-45 minutes about process standardization. And it's interesting to see that in the last years, we always got more questions and more requests to support process standardizations than pure process improvements. So the topic is getting more and more dominant in the market, and so the topic of standardization really hot in the market. And in our today's session, I thought to talk first briefly about the value of process standardization. So why are companies interested in that topic, and then discuss how to plan for standardization and how to realize it. And we conclude then with a few comments on how to sustain those process standards, so that we don't have to go through the exercise again and again. And you see, the process management has in the last 6-10 years really become a management discipline by itself. It's basically helps an organization to move their strategy into people and technology-based execution, and does that fast and reliably. And standardization is one major area that this process management discipline really helps. And that has gotten especially a hot topic in the context of digital transformation. And we all know that this digitalization is about bringing products, services, people together by using digital technologies, most of the cases internet-based. But at the end of the day, the value of a digital transformation is delivered through new or significantly enhanced business processes. And if I can standardize many of those processes, it helps me to roll out such digital solutions faster, so I reduce the time to value. And of course, I don't have then to maintain tons of variants of those technologies, but I can have one standard environment, and with that reduce my overall maintenance efforts. So standardization helps to get more value out of digital transformation. And if as a company you really want to get the full benefit from such a digitalization, you move towards an organization that is really agile, an organization that is flexible, innovative, and there comes up that new buzzword and trend about the composable enterprise. And the composable enterprise as a result of digital transformation. And that form of organization means that on one hand, you centralize support processes, for example, in a shared service organization to improve efficiency, and you push market-facing activities in a product and service oriented way into decentralized units to be really market focused and can react quickly to all the needs. And you enable such an structure through an appropriate IT environment. Core of that is an automation platform, and that automation platform then pulls together different capabilities, business capabilities, so basically components of software that can then be used in the way required by our decentralized units. And that organization, that form of a composable enterprise requires a really efficient approach to standardization. You need to standardize to get your shared service organization set up. You need to standardize sub-processes to define business capabilities that you then encapsulate into software components that you can configure together based on your platform. So standardization as the enabler of a powerful new organization, the composable enterprise. And if we bring it down to the typical benefits, then as mentioned, you can get through standardization more efficiency because you reuse digitalization components. You become more agile because if you have to change somewhere in your organization and your processes are standardized, then you define the change and you can execute that very quickly. If every business unit works in a different way, it takes much longer to adjust to a new product or a new market requirement. So clearly a driver of agility. Of course, standardization simplifies also the compliance management because you build the compliance requirements into your standards. And in many organizations, standardization is a question of improving and achieving a consistent customer experience across different business units, across different countries. So a whole set of benefits that you will get out of of standardization and make that part of a digital transformation. However, while that sounds now like the silver bullet, the fantastic solution, I also have to say that digitalization also means that standardization also means that you have to deal with variations of processes. Sounds like a contradiction, but you see, if you standardize processes, for example, in a company with very different products, then if the company owns lots of forests and sells building products, but also paper products, those products just require a set of process variants that you cannot avoid, or different geographies with different legal requirements lead to process variations. So appropriate standardization does not mean that we do now everywhere the same thing, but appropriate standardization means that we identify where can we work everywhere in the same way, and where do we allow variants and where do we encourage those variants. So that is one important part when you start planning for your standardization, that you identify the 3-4 reasons for valid process variants, and that you identify in your processes where those process variations are allowed and where you really want to stick with the standards that you define. When we talk about standardization, then okay, that sounds now all good and right, but what exactly does process standardization mean? What do you standardize? And that's exactly a point where here this ARIS framework comes in very handy. ARIS basically helps you to look at a business process from a different perspective, gives you a multifaceted view on your business process, and like that you can identify exactly which dimensions you want to address in your standardization. And this is a very important exercise, because process standardization can, and in most of the cases, includes organizational aspects. For example, that you have in every production unit the same roles so that you can easily exchange people. So standardization addresses the organization view on the process. Of course, if you want to have standard processes with consistent performance, you need to have the same information available. So you need to standardize master and often also transaction data. Standardization to deliver, for example, consistent client experience requires a standardization of the deliverables, a definition of what the outcome of a process should really be. And that includes specific service levels that we need to achieve. If you define, for example, okay, delivery on time means it arrives at a certain date, the products arrive at a certain date or earlier, then that may lead to big problems. If you are a company that delivers here bathroom equipment and suddenly your bathtub arrives 3 days early, that creates issues for your clients. So the right deliverable that you want to standardize on is not just the due date, but it is the variance around that due date that needs to be minimized. And the process standardization needs to really have a very good grip around that deliverable view on our process. And of course, when we talk about standardizing, it means also standardizing different functions, so that we do the same things in different locations or in different business units. So in your standardization plan, it's key to think about all those areas, and then last not least, about how all that fits together. So basically about the control flow of your process and answering the question, who is doing what, by means of which data to produce which deliverable, and in which logical sequence. And if you can then answer that question, then you have really defined your process standard in a way that you are ready to make that happen. But very key to address all these different perspectives and address them in the context of the goals of your standardization. This organizational view in a process standardization is an aspect I cannot stress enough. I mentioned here the standardization of roles. But it also, the organizational view, it also addresses on which level of your organization do you standardize. As I mentioned here in the context of the composable enterprise, you may want to centralize some of the processes and have them only once in your organization. Centralized procurement processes, centralized reporting processes that you have in your shared services organization. That means those process standards only really happen once for the entire organization. But you can also standardize in a decentralized way. You can standardize the processes that are then carried out in different business units or in production units. Like you standardize your equipment maintenance process so that you deliver the same maintenance experience for your clients wherever they are in the world. And then you may come up with one standard process that is carried out in all different business units. But you can also come up with, as mentioned before, with a standard that is in part of the process the same all over the world, but we know there are components in that process that will vary and that have to be different, for example, in different countries. That is often the case in human resource management processes where you can do parts of the processes, the same in across different countries, but in other areas you just need to reflect legal requirements in different countries. And then of course there are processes where you intentionally want to give the freedom to the decentralized units to execute them in the way they need, so where you don't have any standardization at all. So the level where you standardize and the approach to your standardization, organizational aspects that are really important to address. So once you have identified, okay, where do I need variations of my processes? You have addressed all the different views and have a clear idea what you want to standardize. Then, of course, we need to see to what degree do we standardize, which level of detail do we want to standardize, and which level of abstraction do we want to standardize on. And that again depends very, very heavily on the goals that you have in your standardization. You have a process that is highly compliance relevant, where you really, really want to make sure that wherever, in whatever location that process happens, my compliance documentation is filled out in exactly the same way. Then you would most likely define that process in a that standard process in a very high level of detail, so that you don't give any freedom to people to deviate from that, but you really need everybody do that in the same way, or if it's automated, have software or bots execute that process in the same way in every detail. Then you have other processes where you may say, okay, the way how we deal with our clients, we want to define that on a high level, but then leave a lot of freedom to different people, so they can execute the details how it's best best suited in the specific situation. So depending on your goals, you standardize and you define your standard on different levels of detail. And also depending on your goals, you define your standard on different levels of abstraction. So on different levels of describing how that process is executed. For example, if you want to roll out an ERP system, an SAP S/4HANA or whatever, and you really want to use that on a global level, well, then it makes sense to define that standard very concrete based on that specific software solution. If you say, you know what, we want to define that we use in every country, in every business unit, an automation platform, and reuse some of our pre-developed business capabilities. However, we leave it up to the decentralized units to select an automation environment that is best suited for their country and where they have a good service. Then you may standardize that level of on a higher level of abstraction. You may just define where you use that automation platform, but not exactly which product you use. So at the beginning of a standardization initiative, when you plan for that, you need to know where can I really standardize and where do I have to allow necessary variance. You need to look at your process from all relevant points of view, including especially the organizational point of view. And third, you need to have a clear idea based on your goals to which level of detail you want to standardize and to which level of abstraction you want to standardize. And once you have taken those decisions, you can really move into your specific projects. And to give you now a bit of feeling how we move from this more general thinking into concrete standardization projects. Here an example of such a process model in a BPMN format, which is in the meantime industry standard to describe business processes. And in this format, you basically automatically address all the views that we have just seen here in our ARIS architecture. So that helps you really to apply that in a systematic way. You can define the level of abstraction by either mentioning specific products that you use or just a type of a product that you use. Of course, you can have a hierarchical decomposition to address the level of detail. So it's a perfect tool to operationalize the definition of your standards. And to give you a bit of an idea how that looks in practice here, we had a few months ago a project with a very big technology manufacturing companies, and they had a very important sales configuration process at the very beginning part of the sales, when the products were specified according to the needs of the client. And as is, a capture showed that all 5 regions handle the process completely differently. And all of those regions had things they do well and had also quite a few improvement opportunities. Our initial thinking was, okay, we define then a part of the process that is the global standard, and then we identify where we can allow variance. But in that specific case, we ended then up in a situation that all 5 regions saw and learned from each other through that visibility that those process models brought, so that they came to the conclusion we can work with one standard process across the 5 regions, and with that achieve on one hand a consistent customer experience, but on the other hand, due to the application of the good and best practices of all the regions, come up with efficiency gains, especially cycle time reductions across all regions through the implementation of that standard. So one example how you can really move very pragmatically from the existing variants to a process standard. But I have to throw in a but here. In most of the situations, you will see that in your process are different components, different parts of that process where it wouldn't make sense, as explained before, to try to standardize that across the different business units or across the different regions. And that is also then a field where a more sophisticated use of our process management capabilities can really help. And in most of the cases, we have then a situation like described here, that we have on one hand described what we want to enforce as a core standard that is really done the same in all product units, in all regions, and where are the areas where we know that here different market characteristics, different client groups will require variance that we accept, and where we predefine how to manage them and how to make them part of our standardization effort. And that is a very, very important part when you develop such here often called global design templates or enterprise-wide reference models, that you set clear expectations. Where do we really see everybody doing the same? So on pure standard, and where do we know that we have at least a set of predefined variants, and that we have a clear idea how we manage that. Defining such process reference models as basically description of our standardization, our degree of standardization, and also the components of our standardization, can of course be done in a company specific way from scratch, but especially in a digital transformation context, there's also some accelerators available to come up with such standard descriptions. For example, you have industry reference models available, like from APQC, where you can get a first idea, well, how does good for a specific process look like? So you have a starting point for your definition of your company's standards. And very importantly, you have the possibility to already include the capabilities of a technology or a type of technology that you are going to use. And a great example is if you go with an here a software implementation like an SAP implementation, that you can then use the reference models that show how a specific process in an ideal situation is carried out using that software. And then instead of defining your standard from scratch, you just make that business impact of your software visible, and you adjust it to your specific needs of your organization. That reduces time to define the standard, and it makes sure that your standard already reflects the capabilities of your software, and then you can use that to roll out and drive a process-led implementation of your digital transformation. In standardization projects, when you define such a global template and roll that then out across business units, that has often, or in most of the cases, a much bigger impact than a traditional improvement of just one individual process. You basically always multiply the impact of the new process, and therefore, it's very key to have a good idea upfront what the impact of our to-be process would really be. And this is a situation where the use of a process simulation has turned out to be extremely helpful. You collect key attributes like cost, time, probabilities of decisions in your process, and then you compare as is processes as they are currently carried out, for example, in different regions, and compare that with the performance of your standard, leveraging your new ways of executing the process, your new technologies, your new organizational models, so that you get upfront a very good, and as many projects have shown, a very reliable idea about the quantified business impact of your standardization. And that is on one hand, of course, important to justify the cost to such a standardization. So basically to build a business case on, but it's also a great way to mitigate a risk. So to include such a pragmatic process simulation in a standardization initiative makes big sense. And we had there examples like in a huge insurance organization where we could show that their process standards in larger countries that makes sense to implement the entire standard, but in smaller country organizations, if you just realize about 60% of that process, and the rest you let the country execute it as they best desire, that is completely fine, because the additional benefits would not justify the cost to manage the change and to maintain additionally needed software components in those countries. So you can use such a simulation approach to really identify the best degree of standardization and the best degree of automation and digitalization in different organizational units. In many situations, if you if you remember the example of the organizational levels I mentioned before, there are processes that you are going to standardize that are distributed in many client-facing units. And by the way, real digitalization, a big difference to the classical process-led software implementation is that it focuses less on the high transaction back office processes, but more on the customer facing processes. And that's why it gets more and more important to verify a process standard and a standardization through the lens of key stakeholders, especially, of course, of key clients. And there again, process management has the right approaches and capabilities available here with our stakeholder, or specifically customer journey planning, and create the maps with the touch points of your clients, identify the current experience and how you want to see it in the future. And then comes the important point. You link to these customer touch points the relevant processes that you need in order to achieve the relevant experience. And that is something you would then include in your standardization goals, and with that in the definition of your standard. Like in a big consumer goods company, they addressed a new customer segment and wanted to make it easy for them. So they opened lots of different ways for their new clients to order their products. And suddenly they saw that the customer experience in areas around the ordering and around payment got worse and worse, more complaints and all that. And it's turned out that depending on through which channel a client orders, he gets or asks for quotes, there are slightly different prices offered, because the pricing engines were not standardized, and some of the detailed processes had just variants that led to different outcomes. So that was then something where an appropriate process standardization, very much in detail, really led to significant improvements of customer experience. And that standardization was driven through that external outside-in view on our processes. So something to keep in mind when standardizing client-facing processes, so that we really get that view of the client included. Then, of course, you use those defined standard processes as the guideline to configure or develop your software. You develop your business capabilities, so software components, and you link them together so that they really reflect the workflow that you have and control flow that you have defined, as we discussed that before. But it's also important to use those process models and especially to show the difference between as is and standard process, so that you address your change management. And I can only say that in many of those standardization initiatives, to get the configuration of your software right and to get the components delivered appropriately, that normally works well. And the limiting factor is often really the people side. So to make that a real important part of your standardization initiative, very important. Then we come, of course, to a situation. That we have implemented our standard, and that we want to see, do we really follow that process standard, or do we still have a variance? And that is a point where here techniques like process mining help a lot. And we had a case where we standardized processes in the maintenance area of a big energy company. And it showed after some time that the process variance got less, but that in one location the cycle time got higher and didn't improve as we had expected through the rollout of that standard. And we could then see through a comparison of the actual processes with our defined standard that there was always one key step: the assignment of the equipment to our maintenance order was skipped, and that led to all kinds of issues. So we could fix the implementation of the standard based on this mining information. And of course, you can then measure whether you deliver the results that you have predicted before, for example, with your here in your simulation. So process mining as a tool to realize the value of standardization and manage the standard process on an ongoing basis, very, very powerful. And I'm at this point often asked, well, shouldn't we use that upfront more to discover the process variance and save time? That depends really on the specific situation, if that makes sense. If the initial processes are already sufficiently automated, if there is a lot of manual or office application work done that needs to be captured. In many situations, it is much more beneficial to use that mining technology once you have established your standard and you really want to manage that and avoid future process variance. And that leads us to very briefly to the last topic. Once we have implemented our standard and we see how the process develops, then of course we need to keep an eye on that process and the handle around it, that we launch adjustment actions as I just described in this maintenance case. And therefore you would build an appropriate process governance organization with here the relevant roles, of course, at the center, the process owner who oversees the process and who uses then the definition of your standard in a form of a process model or a global design model as the baseline to manage the process towards, who gets the information bottom up through the mining to see how well we are doing to that standard and how we meet our goals, and depending on the necessary actions, they pull then in again the core organization to support process adjustments and make sure that we keep on moving towards our standard and realizing our goals. And of course, that whole governance topic is a big topic by itself. Cannot go into the detail, just wanted to make the point that I heavily recommend not to underestimate that it's in most of the cases not sufficient just to define 3 roles and then hope that people carry out their processes, but it's important to define those governance processes just as you define any other business process. This is part of our process of process management, and people need to understand what it means to be a process owner and what it means to have an eye on their processes and to set relevant actions. And then you can use tools like mining tools or repository and modeling tools to have the information about the process at your fingertips and manage it effectively. And to enable that effective management, I can really say that nowadays you basically need also for your governance process or your process of process management in general and digital approach. So you normally set the directions and define your process standards top down in a modeling approach, and as I just explained, you then manage it through based on bottom up specific data about process instances, so that at the end of the day you really manage your organization towards that standard and towards achieving the benefits and goals that you have defined before. And with that, we are at the end of that discussion. So we have seen that process standardization is an important enabler of a successful digital transformation. It really helps to achieve some of the key benefits like agility, like efficiency, like compliance. But it's also important to see that we need an appropriate standardization, so that we have a clear idea where we accept still process variations after our standardization initiative. It's very, very key to be realistic here. We need to make sure that we have clearly defined which aspects and which views and which components of a process we standardize, organization, data, functions, deliverables, control flow. You may address all of them. You may only address the subsets based on your goals. You need to have a clear idea about the level of detail you define your standard on, and how concrete you will get in defining how you execute that process, again depending on your specific standardization goals. And as we have seen, the discipline of process management provides all capabilities necessary to plan and realize such a process standardization. So it's a good idea to make sure to have that in place either already before we drive our standardization initiative, or develop it while standardizing, so that you develop that capability and you apply it right away, which has proven to be a very, very pragmatic approach. And last not least, keep in mind, if you implement your standard and leave it alone, I could almost guarantee you that in half a year you will have again all your process variations or different ones. So to really govern that process properly and effectively, very, very key, and also something to have in mind already at the beginning of the initiative. And there the good news is again that tools like process repository and modeling tools or mining tools really help to come up with real efficient governance processes. And with that, we are at the end of that little discussion. I know a lot of content in a short time. We could also talk a day or longer about it. Would be, of course, glad to do that. And now I'm happy to answer at least a few questions. If we don't have enough time, you see we have quite a few here publications, also many of them directly related to our topic. Here, what I just explained is described in a little white paper based on also some academic research. So surely something interesting, and what I of course highly recommend, the just published new book of the founder of the Scheer Group, August Wilhelm Scheer, about the composable enterprise, where you also find many of those hints towards the need for standardization and doing that on different levels and in different ways in your organization. So also a good read. But with that, and thank you very much for your attention.